From the very first moment the accusation echoed through the sunlit corridor, I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. The morning light poured through the medical room windows, turning dust particles into floating sparks, and there she stood, Afsheen, her eyes wide, trembling, filled with a painful mix of embarrassment and outrage. My heart thundered so loudly that I could barely hear my own breath. I looked at her, stunned, confused, helpless, because I had no idea how things had escalated this far. Just a few minutes earlier, I was trying to help her, trying to make sure she was okay, and now suddenly I was being told to take responsibility for something I didn't even understand. My hands were still stained with the faint smell of antiseptic ointment, and yet somehow it felt like the entire world was pointing fingers at me. If you believe in kindness, fairness, and giving people second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, Stories of Kindness. Your support helps these stories reach more hearts. I remember exactly how the day began, warm and bright, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of early jasmine. I had arrived early at the community center where I volunteered every weekend. My name is Faris, a 27-year-old who believed life becomes meaningful when we help others. That morning, we had a small first aid session for young volunteers who wanted to learn the basics. Afsheen had joined the program only 2 days prior, calm, quiet, always keeping a polite distance from everyone. She was about 24, with a modest peach scarf framing her face and an expression that always seemed halfway between worry and determination. She had bruised her wrist earlier that day while helping move some heavy boxes. It wasn't a serious injury, but she looked shaken, so I offered to guide her to the first aid room to apply ointment and a bandage. The room was bright, filled with organized cabinets and the faint hum of a ceiling fan. I asked her to sit. She nodded silently, keeping her gaze low. As I gently applied the ointment, she winced at first, then whispered that it wasn't the pain that bothered her, it was the fear that she had done something wrong. I reassured her calmly, telling her that accidents happen, and helping people is part of why we're here. I had no idea that minutes later, everything would turn upside down. As I secured the final strip of bandage, someone knocked, then abruptly pushed the door open. It was Nita, one of the strict coordinators, stern, blunt, quick to misinterpret situations. She froze for 2 seconds, glanced at Afsheen's reddened face, looked at me holding the ointment tube, and her entire expression sharpened like a blade. In that instant, before either of us could explain, she assumed the worst. Afsheen's startled reaction only worsened things. She stuttered, overwhelmed by the sudden pressure, and the words that came out of her mouth, out of sheer panic, were taken completely out of context. You've seen everything, take responsibility. I felt the blood drain from my face. Everything happened too fast. I stood there frozen, the ointment tube in my hand suddenly feeling like evidence of a crime I didn't commit. My voice cracked as I stammered, I just put ointment. I swear. But Nita didn't wait for explanations. She glared, marched out, and said she would report the situation to the main committee. My chest tightened painfully. I wasn't scared of punishment, I was terrified of being misunderstood, of my intentions being twisted into something ugly. Afsheen, pale and trembling, kept whispering apologies. She was shaking, trying to explain herself, but her anxiety made her stumble over every word. I took a step back, trying to breathe, telling her she didn't need to explain anything to me, that we just had to clear the misunderstanding. But she covered her face with her uninjured hand and whispered that she never meant those words the way they sounded. She said her mind panicked, and because she came from a very strict household where she was always blamed for everything, the fear made her phrase things badly. The next few hours felt like a slow-motion nightmare. The misunderstanding spread among the volunteers like wildfire. People whispered behind my back, some glancing at me with pity, others with suspicion. I tried to speak with Nita, but she dismissed me with a cold shake of her head. My chest felt heavy, like someone had placed a stone inside it. My reputation, my honesty, my years of volunteer work, everything felt like it was collapsing over a single moment twisted by fear. Afsheen didn't come out of the break room. She refused to go home, afraid her family would misunderstand her again. Meanwhile, the committee scheduled a meeting to review the matter. The fear in Afsheen's eyes haunted me. She didn't want my life damaged because of her anxious outburst, and I didn't want her drowning in guilt for a mistake that came from trauma, not malice. By late afternoon, the jasmine scent had faded, replaced by the growing tension that clung to the hallways. I made a quiet decision, not to defend myself alone, but to defend her as well. She needed someone to stand by her, someone who didn't treat her like a fragile source of problems. I approached the committee head, Sir Raymond, a calm and fair man known for listening before judging. I told him everything, every detail, every second of what actually happened. But what surprised me was when Afsheen walked into the office right behind me. Her hands trembled, but her voice, though quiet, did not waver this time. She narrated the truth firmly, clearly, owning her mistake and emphasizing one thing: I had only helped her. I looked at her, stunned by her courage. The committee listened, and for a long time the room fell silent. Then, finally, they declared it was all a misunderstanding. The weight that lifted from my chest felt like being able to breathe for the first time all day. But the story didn't end there. Outside the room, as the sun dipped lower and the courtyard glowed gold, Afsheen broke down in tears. Not from fear anymore, but from relief. She kept apologizing, saying she had caused trouble I didn't deserve. I told her something I hadn't fully understood myself until that moment, that real responsibility isn't just about actions, it's about standing by someone when they're afraid. And that I wasn't angry at her. In fact, I admired her bravery for setting things right. Days passed, and things slowly returned to normal. But something had changed, something subtle yet powerful. Afsheen started opening up more. She shared that her family was strict and emotionally distant, making her fear every mistake, no matter how small. I listened. I encouraged her to breathe, to trust, to believe that not every error ruins a life. She had spent years trapped in fear of disappointing others, and all she needed was someone who treated her with gentleness instead of judgment. What I didn't expect was how deeply her courage impacted me. Seeing her fight her fears made me confront my own insecurities. I wasn't as confident as I pretended to be. I worried constantly about disappointing others, about being misunderstood, about not being enough. In helping her heal, I unknowingly began healing parts of myself too. One sunny day, exactly 3 weeks after the incident, the community center held an outdoor medical camp. Children played nearby, volunteers rushed around carrying supplies, and the sky was a clear, brilliant shade of blue. While I was arranging a table of first aid items, I felt someone standing quietly beside me. It was Afsheen, holding 2 cups of tea. She handed me one without saying a word. We stood there, sharing the peaceful afternoon, the breeze soft and warm. She finally whispered that she wanted to thank me properly, not for clearing the misunderstanding, but for not abandoning her when it would have been easier to walk away.